Day 480 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update, super quick update, as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, and currently Russia is sitting on over 219,000 military personnel losses, actually just shy of that 220k milestone. And then looking at the Russian hardware losses, 7 tanks, 23 APVs, 13 artillery, and even 2 helicopters. Then we'll head back across to the map, where we'll quickly start out in Russia once again, as the fires never cease. And so this time, this one was suspiciously set off at the Russian Ministry of Emergencies building in the Belgorod Oblast, with some reports claiming it to be a local arsonist. Then we'll head on down to the Donbass today, so starting out in Avdiivka, for instance, today. So this is where Ukraine hit Russian hidey hole positions in the outskirts of the town. And just as a reminder for this region, the particular reason why Russia has been having such a hard time in Avdiivka since the war began is because Ukrainian forces have created extremely well fortified positions here. And not just since February 24th last year when Russia invaded, because in this location it started way back in 2014 with the so-called Russian-backed separatists that seized Crimea and parts of the Donbass. So in this very region, Ukraine actually has become quite adept at fortifications, and quite the experience to go along with all of that as well. Oh, and also I usually say the so-called Russian-backed separatists because it's 2023 now, and it's clear to see Russia and the Kremlin always had their sights set on invading and annexing the entirety of Ukraine into Russia, which is really a no-brainer at this point. Then somewhere in the east, somewhere in the Donbass, I believe, there was, just over the weekend, the Ukrainian forces happily took out yet another Russian Ka-52 Alligator attack helicopter, somewhere near the Donetsk front, in fact, this was. So zoom out for a little bit of context there, around this location here somewhere. Then we'll move across to largely the Zaporizhzhia front. And, apart from the liberated settlements and the Ukrainian flag flying that goes along with all of that there, I almost forgot about something else that's very common when this happens with these liberations by the Ukrainian forces, which is the tearing down of Russian advertisements and posters, then proceeding to burn them all the way back to hell where they came. And in fact, these posters are actually pretty offensive to Ukrainians, really. They tell you that you're Russian and pretty much that your allegiance is to Russia now, and that Russia is your true cultural heritage. Just really mad stuff. So there's also a lot of symbology to that burning as well. But as for the front line here today, so we'll start out on the western front of the Zaporizhzhia front line, as War Gonzo, who was a Russian military blogger, reported that Ukrainian forces have entrenched on the borders of Piaty Katki, so right there. In fact, even more than that, it's actually said to be completely contested now, that settlement. And I do have to add in here that, yeah, it might seem just another settlement, right? But it's not really. Not at all, in fact. As this settlement has been under control from the Russian forces since April 2022. So it is, in fact, a hugely symbolic, of the times. Then moving to the east a bit, we got some map updates recently there. So if I was to use the date map, I'll go back and forward just a day. So really we're talking just south of this northern settlement here, Melitokmaka, where the Ukrainian forces have indeed confirmed the liberation for that location there. In fact, just in the last video, I mentioned how the Ukrainian armed forces had this location just south of the settlement, deep within their sights. And just moving more to the east, although it's already happened a day before last or so, we can see that there has indeed been some confirmation of liberations really talking into some huge swaths of land here, at least as far as it's confirmed. So we go back a day or two and we can see the push right through Makarivka there. Of course, the Ukrainian forces are moving in a southerly direction there, going on to the next settlement and the next, but always nice to see that as well. But just generally, what is perhaps most impressive about Ukrainian counteroffensive operations in the south and the southeast front lines at the moment is how they're actually choosing to perform these operations at nighttime due to an influx of vehicles for the Ukrainian forces with night optics, which is just a massive technological disparity against the Russian forces. And believe it or not, this isn't really a capability that Ukraine has had before, at least not at this scale now, with, what with all the influx of the NATO and the Western equipment. And this all helps to have a leading edge over the Russian forces when they perform these night assault operations to counteract any risks for, say, Russian drones in the area or artillery or indeed Russian heavy armor. Most, if not all of which, can really only correctly take place in the daytime for Russia, so those types of assault or even defensive operations, because Russia simply has older Soviet tech, typically without any modern night optics, or in most cases, none at all. So nighttime operations is truly an on-the-ground edge that Ukraine has started using to their advantage. And so you'll also see this footage here is of a Bradley M2 infantry fighting vehicle in Ukrainian service just last night, in fact, destroying Russian targets on the Zaporizhzhia, somewhere on the Zaporizhzhia front line, although I don't exactly know where. So, moral of the story, Ukrainian nighttime assaults, it's now very much a thing. Then we'll move a little bit more south here. So, as per local Telegram channels, a Russian ammunition dump was reportedly hit in Heneshevsk there. So this is part of the most southeastern part of the Kherson Oblast there. And it appeared to be really one unimpeded and impressive cook-off. Now, the thing is, Russia has been forced to adapt to a change in military environment and not consolidate large ammunition depots all into one or just make it into one big one. I mean, as has Ukraine had to do the same thing too. But every now and then, Russia just seems to forget about it and go back to their old ways. Or, more specifically, in my opinion, we're dealing with a low morale Russian military here, where Russian military personnel see the war as very differently to that of how Russian state TV is portraying it to in the media to their families back home, causing many segments within the Russian ground forces to have lost all hope, with genuinely feeling like it's a losing battle, and thus making decisions that aren't the most effective. And I say this based on the now countless Russian call intercepts going back home, where they're saying to their families this war is just not what they thought it was, and that the Ukrainian armed forces are actually very well trained, as they continue to go on to say. Then moving across on the Kherson map to... Okay, so here we go. Now, the Kakhovka hydroelectric dam, which was blown up about 2 weeks ago, there was just a recent New York Times investigation published that indicates how explosive charges running through the passageway of the base of the dam were then detonated, causing the destruction of the dam. And yeah, that'll do it. But more specifically than that, they're otherwise known as detonation chambers, designed for this very purpose by the Soviet engineers back in the 50s. Oh, by the way, detonation chambers, of which were only accessible via the Russian-controlled side of the Kakhovka Dam before it exploded. But as more and more proof continues to come out about this and Russia's handling of the situation, to put it diplomatically, will Russia admit to what they've done? No, not at all. Russia will always deny it anyway. And Under the current Russian regime, I can guarantee that is fact. It will just never change. So, what I like to say here is we can only look at Russia's actions. They invaded another country by military force. They displaced 17 million Ukrainians as a direct result of their invasion, not to mention the massive loss of life. And to be fair, on both sides, that has been a result of Russia's senseless invasion into Ukraine. So this is why you see so much solidarity amongst so many nations now globally that continue to effectively just call out Russia on their BS. Because, for instance, actually having a sane dialogue based on reality with, say, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov or Putin himself, frankly, it's an impossibility at this stage or at this point. Then we'll head on down to the Russian-occupied Crimean peninsula today, as it appears Russia is getting progressively more and more paranoid about their Black Sea fleet, largely stationed at Sevastopol. As parts of the fleet are being forced bit by bit to leave and redeploy those naval forces to more easterly locations just behind the peninsula itself. And actually, rightly so, as the closer that Ukraine gets with its counter-offensive operations, closer and closer to Crimea, then it simply means that these locations like Sevastopol and the Black Sea Fleet, largely stationed there, is just in range of so many more Ukrainian weapons platforms. So it forces the Russian naval fleet out of there, which all in turn reduces Russia's capability to project power in the region, so from the Black Sea right here. Then also, speaking of Russian paranoia, here's a different map of the top of the Crimean Peninsula, showing Russia's extensive fortifications in the north. As if to be worried that someone might want to waltz right in and take back their land, perhaps one day soon. And rather, everything I just said is more in line with Russia or the Russian army just being scared. The actual paranoia you can still see on this map. Right there. So trench fortifications along the western Crimean beaches. Paranoia because Ukraine doesn't really have a navy to perform an amphibious assault with in the first place. Nor would they probably even do that if they had half a decent navy anyway. As instead they'll likely end up just doing precision strikes, artillery and mine clearing operations from the north end of the Crimean Peninsula there, where they can traverse through land. And of course do so after cutting off Crimea by land to Kherson and by cutting off the Kerch Bridge to the Russian mainland as well, via a cheeky Storm Shadow missile strike or two. Then we'll head across to some news for today, mostly a bit of hardware news. So Spain will send an additional 20 armoured vehicles and 4 Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, but also provide a military hospital as well, according to the Spanish Minister of Defense. Then in some other hardware news, Danish authorities are ready to hand over F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, and really ready to hit the go button on that one. But it is still approval or subject to approval from the US, which sometimes comes down to political timing, but also sufficient training as well that Ukrainian pilots are currently in the midst of getting. Meanwhile, on this topic, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov warned of a, quote, technical and military response if Moscow perceives F-16s flying over Ukraine as a threat to Russia. Which is all very vague these days, isn't it? It looks like they've decided to go light on using the nuclear bluff card after having used it for about the 15th time by now. Then in a couple of quick funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So at Russia's recent economic forum in St. Petersburg, Russia put on display its car manufacturing prowess. With, I believe, what was a Russian Lada make of car. Except the car just wouldn't start when trying to present itself. Which in fact all reminds me of something that happened just a few years ago, I think around 2019, also in Russia. Some sort of military vehicle's handle fell off when trying to open the door, with Putin right there. Gerasimov in the background too, military general. So, as you can see, Russia's car manufacturing capabilities is basically going down the toilet. As Russia used to have about 22 car factories countrywide, most of which were controlled by international companies, but now they're down to 8. 8. Just 8. Due to all of those economic sanctions since placed on Russia. Then in a final quick funny to round it off with today, guys, so in something I haven't seen for what feels like such a long time now, and this footage appears new, I do not recognize it. I'm kind of an expert in this type of thing. So what we have here is a few Russian soldiers still in the porcelain god toilet looting game. So it appears a Russian camp was nearby, if you notice, and so 2 people came out with the highly sought after toilet loot, then proceeded to move back into the wooded encampment. Ah, Russia. All class and nothing less. So that'll be it for today, guys. Just a shorter video, but yeah, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment. In this case, I really do hope that you subscribe. I'm just shy of that 80,000 mark. It would just feel better for the channel in a way to be 80 and upwards, I feel. But yeah, thanks again for watching, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.